Alright guys, so today I'm going to be going over my second start to finish, and this is going to be a photo of Sunwapta Falls in Jasper National Park, and we're going to be using, just like the last start to finish, all of the techniques in the first 6 chapters, a few extra ones, and just going to kind of see the entire workflow from start to finish rather than just doing a technique-based tutorial. So first I'm going to import my images to Lightroom. Here they are, just 2 exposures for this one. Alright, come over to the Develop tab and just kind of go over these photos with you guys. Collapse that. So here is a photo of Sunwapta Falls. It is a 10-second exposure at f/22. So f/22, the most of the image is in focus opposed to like f/2.8. So that's kind of why I put it up there, and also because I could adjust my shutter speed to make it 10 seconds long, and I also had an ND filter on. So really happy with how this water looks. Bree's in here and she was able to stand still for 10 seconds and she's super sharp in the image. There are some kind of dirt spots in my sensor, so I have to clean those up. All over here too. But the image overall is really well in focus. Actually up here in the mountains is a bit overexposed, and the sky completely is too overexposed. So that is what this layer is going to be for. So it's the same image. It was on a tripod, but this one's only 2.5 seconds. So the foreground is way too dark. These mountains look really nice in this one, and the sky also looks really nice. So first thing I'm going to do is edit these in Lightroom and then bring them into Photoshop, blend them, and then kind of apply all the techniques we've been learning. So I'm just going to bump the general exposure to that. Bring those highlights down a bit. Actually, I'll probably bring them down all the way actually. Put that down a touch. Bring up the shadows to just a bit to get all these shadows in here coming out. Bring up the whites, but make sure it's not overexposed. Drop the blacks a little bit to add some contrast and depth. Probably bump the clarity 2 stops. Bring up a little bit of vibrance. Really fast, I'm going to remove chromatic aberrations and enable profile corrections. That did brighten the image by taking away the vignette, so probably drop the exposure just to stop. Maybe even one more. Looks a little bright. I'm going to put a small S-curve on my photo. Happy with that. Right here, these blues, really want those to be a little bit more aqua, so I'm going to make that a few stops over. And I'm going to saturate the aquas because I want the aquas in here to pick up and get saturated, but I don't want to affect the sky, so that's why I'm not going to pull the blue slider. And you can see right here the aquas coming in. Just put it up a little bit because I know we're going to dodge some color in there later. The yellows I do want to have a little bit more warmth, so drop those a bit. Put the greens up a little bit just to kind of contrast that. And then I'm going to saturate the yellows. Maybe bring the luminance down just a touch. So let's look at the before, after, like that a lot. I'm going to bring up the temperature 2 stops, magenta up 1 stop, and then I'm going to highlight both photos with shift click, and then I'm going to synchronize these edits. And now right here, I'm just going to look at these mountains and sky, and I want them to be able to blend nicely. So I'm going to try to make them somewhat similar. So they should blend nice, but these mountains are way different exposure levels. So I'm actually going to bring up the shadows of the sky exposure a bit, and the blacks. That'll help some of the blending. Yeah, that looks nice. Gonna make this pretty warm. I'm gonna drag in some color here too. Yeah, there we go. It was around sunset, but I really want to bring in some dramatic color into this. So happy with that. Alright, now I'm gonna highlight both these images and edit them and open them as layers in Photoshop. Right, and I am going to bring this lighter exposure down here just because I prefer to be on the bottom. And now before anything, I'm going to align these layers. Just come up to Edit, Auto Align Layers, just to make sure we don't have any issues when we blend them to get any doubling. So now we can turn on and off. Our layers are perfectly in sync. You can see they cropped a little bit around the edges. So I am just going to put a layer mask on this sky layer, invert it so nothing's showing up, and I'm just going to blend this in manually and probably have to modify it just a little bit. So I'm going to take a white brush starting at 100% opacity to get the top in here. Looks good. Drop it to about 50%, then kind of just feather it into this. I'm going very, very rough with this. And the trees I want in the lighter exposure, but the mountains, if you remember, they were blown out, so that's why I wanted to blend in some of that from the sky exposure. It's a little bit noticeably different, so now I'm going to come in with a 20% brush, just do a few passes with a white brush. I'm going to take a few passes with a black brush. Just kind of do this until we get to a point that I like and it's feathered in nicely. Now I'm going to come down to 10% brush, go a little bit bigger. This will just really blend these nicely. Now I'm going to come in with a 50% brush. Just the top up here, I want to make sure all of this is coming in. Really, I'm going to pull out some mood in the sky. Alright, so I think that is blended perfectly. Do the before and the after. I think that looks really nice. So I'm going to make a merge visible layer, Command Option Shift E, and then I'm going to do Command T to free transform this. Let me actually, the top actually does not need it, and I don't want to stretch that because I want these clouds, I really wish these clouds were lower. So I'm actually going to try to fix that later with some warping, but I don't want to stretch that at all. So I'm just going to stretch these three sides, get those crops out of here, click enter. And now, just because I know I'm very happy with how we blended this and I'm not going to have to come back here, I'm going to flatten my image. Here we go. Just to reduce the file size and give us kind of a base layer to work with. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is Command J to make a copy of our background layer. I'm going to call this Cleanup. Because I don't know what was going on. I think we were rushing to shoot this sunset, and my sensor was super dirty, so I must have been switching lenses, and I was just going too fast, and who knows. Maybe it was windy, maybe some stuff got in that we didn't want. So I'm going to take my spot healing brush tool, and there's a lot. So I'm just going to take a quick minute to kind of clean all of this up. It should be pretty easy, but always try to have a clean sensor so you don't have to do this. However, it is manageable to fix, just takes a second. Alright, so now that that is done with, let's do a before and after. It's a little, very minimal stuff, but I'm going to make a big difference, and you really need to take the time to clean it up if your sensor was dirty. And later, as we continue to edit this photo, there may be some things that we need to go back and edit, because as you make adjustments to your photo, sometimes dirty sensors where it wasn't showing will show up based on what you're editing. So just be wary of that. So now before I do any of the creative edits, coloring, toning, or adding any mood, I'm going to try to get any warping out of the way now. So I'm going to make a merge visible layer, Command Option Shift E. I'm going to call this Warp 1. I'm going to make a selection. And this is a pretty rough selection. I'm actually just going to include everything except for the water, kind of just the mountains and trees and up. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Warp, and I want these mountains just to appear bigger. So I'm just going to kind of push these together, because when you push mountains together, it actually makes them look taller. Alright, so now I push those together. Now I'm going to be pushing this up, but carefully. Deselect that. Let's look at the before, after. Let's see. So when you're warping sometimes, especially when you make a selection, you need to be wary of the selection areas. Like down here, you can see some coarse edges that we're going to need to blend back in. So I'm going to take a black brush, add 100% opacity, and all we need to do is make this look seamless. So just kind of find the areas with those rocks and the high texture areas. This will be easier. Just need to make it like a seamless blend. That looks pretty good. Now over here. That's pretty good. Let's do the before, after. I like that a lot, and that definitely helps those mountains look a little bit bigger, and also brings this cool little curve in here actually, which just kind of accentuates that with the taller trees. Alright, so now one more merge visible layer. Call this, Warp 2. For this, I'm really bummed these clouds weren't lower in the frame. So I'm actually going to try to stretch those and warp those down. So I'm going to make a selection of this sky, and I am going to modify this, select and mask, and want it to be a really, let's actually make our radius 1 pixel before doing anything, and I really want to just have the sky selected. So this tool will help kind of select like-minded areas in here, so all these trees and these leaves will get it, and then if you come back in here, all of the areas that are sky behind the trees, Photoshop will do a really good job of kind of highlighting what needs to be highlighted and not highlighting anything else. So when you really need an exact kind of selection, this select and mask tool is very, very helpful. Alright, let's get that. I think that looks good. Click OK. And now I'm going to come up to Edit, Transform, Warp. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull down. Let's click enter. So let's do the before and after. We really stretch those clouds down, but we ruined the mountains in that warp. Even with the selection, when you try to do something as extreme as that, you kind of have to fix it. I'm gonna Command D to deselect, bring in a layer mask, and I'm going to need to kind of fix all of this, what we just kind of ruined with the mountains, and attempt to keep the clouds kind of where they were. So we're just gonna be brushing this in. Oops. Okay. All that. Let's do before, after. Mountains and trees are still the same. We just brought those clouds down and really brought some more richness to the sky. Now we have this layer we need to fix. So take a 10% brush and just kind of go over this. Kind of help feather that and blend it together. I'll take switch color brushes and just bring it down. Now let's zoom out and see how that looks. I think that helps big time. Before, after. Still actually a little bit of line in here if you look at it. Just gonna kind of hand feather that out. Okay, see how that looks. That looks much better. Just kind of trying to fix up these darker parts. I think that looks seamless, and I really like how the clouds are more in the frame now. So that warp, I thought we were going to be able to just bring down the clouds without affecting the mountain, but because I stretched it to such an extreme extent, it did push the mountains down. So it was fine. All we had to do was bring in a layer mask and kind of feather it in nicely, but now I think that looks much better. Than the clouds are really part of the image rather than in here where it looks like, you know, you just got them out of frame. And just got unlucky because there's nothing I could have done about it. However, bringing them down like that really kind of, I feel like, fills the frame how it should be. So I'm going to make a merge visible, Command Option Shift E, and hide all of these. So I really kind of like the composition a lot more. Where it is now, you know, these rocks are seamless, over here is seamless. Everything is good to go, and I think this is a really good base layer. So I'm going to call this now base layer, just so the background has name, blended base layer, call this warped, and cleaned up base layer. Alright, so now we can get a little bit more into the creative stuff. So, first thing I'm going to do is an Orton effect. Now, we did this in the last one, but just to kind of review it, and for anyone that may have just bought this tutorial, an Orton effect is when you blur your image, making it really dreamy and hazy. There's this really cool effect to it, and then you bring back some texture and take the dreamy blur effect out of the areas you don't want it in, and it adds this really cool effect to your photos. So we have our base layer. I'm going to do Command J to make a copy of that. I'm going to call this Orton. All we're going to do is come up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I do anywhere from 40 to 50 pixels. So let's just do 45. And I'm going to drop the opacity between 15 and 20% based on your liking. So I'm going to put this, let's just see how 16 looks. That looks really good. So when you do this and you see this blur, it really kind of takes out some of the contrast and dulls the image a little bit. So to fix that, we're going to adjust it with the levels. But rather than doing a levels adjustment down here, which would be on your entire photo, we're going to just have this layer selected, come up to Image Adjustments, Levels, And now the levels will just affect this orton layer. So I'm just going to bring back some contrast into this image. Bring in some darks, but I'm going to pull the midtones over because I don't want them to be too dark. And then I'm going to bring in some highlight. Alright, so this is just kind of a balancing act based on your personal preferences. I like that quite a bit. Just going to bring this over just to make sure we're not clipping any highlights over here. So this slider down here actually does the opposite of this. Click OK. See our before and after the orton effect. It brings this really, really cool haze into the image. But I don't want that effect everywhere. So I'm going to put a layer mask on here, and with like a 50% brush, I don't want Bree to have that blur dreamy effect or these rocks. So I'm going to kind of paint that effect out right there, right here as well, because I want these rocks to have some still nice detail. And then these trees and peaks, I still want the detail to be there, so I'm going to brush that effect out. So I really just am using the orton effect to intensify the sky and blur that and the water, and it'll add that haze. So now you can see the before and after. I think it's a really nice effect. I'll even put this up to like 18%. I think that looks nice. Do a merge visible layer, Command Option Shift E. I'm going to do cleanup 2. Oops. Because I'm seeing this fence over here and it's not too distracting, but I don't like it. I'm going to grab my lasso tool. Just grab this big part of the fence. I'm going to do Control click, fill content aware, see how that looks. Command D, that did a good job, and now I'm just going to do this piece by piece. Sometimes works better than trying to do it all at once. And we might just have to fix it with a brush or clone stamp after. Command D. Looks good. We definitely got the fence out. You can see the before and after, but now we need to fix all of this doubling and parts where it duplicated, because that's a clear giveaway. And before I do that, I got to get this last bit of fence. There we go. So now I'm going to make another merge visible layer. Clean up fence is what we'll call that. And then clean up. Just call it clean up 3. Alright. So I'm going to take clone stamp tool, 100% opacity. Just kind of pick an area, rocks, and kind of alt click to make our selection. And I'm actually going to do this at 50% brush, because sometimes when you clone stamp you can kind of make like this new area and kind of give it its own feel. Don't like that tree area. Just going to be dragging different areas and kind of blending them together to kind of make something hopefully that just is seamless and you can't really tell. I'm not liking that too much though. Actually put this in here. Now by putting in different areas kind of all together on its own, you're going to kind of be making something totally new by mixing like 4 different areas of the photo and using that for blending. And that's a good thing because now we won't have to worry about any doubling or anything like that. We can just make sure that it's seamless, the fence is out of there, and someone otherwise would not be able to tell. I need to grab a different area. So now, if you're looking at this image and didn't otherwise know that there was a fence there, you would not be able to tell. Just looks like more of this rock formation and some kind of tree and some brush in the rocks. So I think that looks much better without that. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of the coloring and toning of this image. So I'm going to make a merge visible layer. Check the before and the after. Alright. The thing I noticed on these trees is there's some nice ambient light hitting them from the sun. So I'm just going to try to intensify that with this one. Make a copy of this layer and we'll call this Trees Luminance. Come up to Camera Raw filter. Bring the yellows up all the way. Greens, and I'm going to even bring in a good amount of saturation of these yellows. Bring the greens over to green to make some nice contrast in those trees. It's kind of affecting a few places in the photo. Really just I'm looking at this area here. I'm going to click OK. For this layer I'm going to make a layer mask, invert it, and I'm just going to brush in white where I want it. And that's just on these trees. I'm going to just come in with like a 50% and do multiple passes if I need. So let's look at that before and after. That did a really nice job kind of highlighting those trees. Yeah, I really like that. I'm going to make one more merge visible. I make a lot of these just for kind of organizational purposes and kind of just always having a clear kind of timeline of layers, I guess if you want to call it. And I'm going to try and target these blues down here. So I'm going to pull up my Tony Kuiper luminosity mask. And you could manually brush this in just by your eye, but just in case you do have luminosity masks or want to kind of see how they work and kind of how beneficial they are, I'm just going to try to pull this in. So luminosity masks just help you make selections. So I'm going to try to make a selection of this water based on the source and the color of it. So I'm going to look at the blue, see if it comes up. Not really. Let's try the cyan and even less. So I am gonna do the blue. Then I'm gonna modify with the levels. I'm gonna just bring it up a whole lot. There we go. So I'm gonna click OK, but I am gonna take a black brush. I don't want any of the sky, I just am looking to get the water. Don't want any of this. I just want to be affecting this water. So I'm going to load this as a channel, call this water mask, and now I'm going to come over, hold on, I'm going to make a dodge burn layer, so option, click on the new layer, come to soft light and fill with soft light neutral color. Take my color picker tool, find a nice color I like, and I want to bring in some nice cyan and turquoise. Bring that up there, maybe a little bit more. And now I'm going to come over to my channels and I'm going to load the water mask that we just did by dragging it onto these square selection lines down here. Come over here, and all of these lines, just to kind of get rid of them, you can do Command H to hide them. Now that I have my brush, I'm going to put this at like 25% opacity, just kind of bring in some color there. That's a bit much. I'm going to drop the opacity just down there. I'm going to show you the before and after. It's extremely subtle, but it's a nice way to add some base color to the image. And we're going to come in and kind of dodge in some more blue. Alright guys, so I'm going to do one more thing to kind of bring in color to this photo. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to pull up the color balance. And right here, you can see you can kind of target shadows, midtones, and highlights. And you kind of see where your colors are at. You can kind of change the balance of them selectively by the highlights and shadows or midtones. So what I'm going to do is all of the water, which is the main highlights in the photo, other than kind of the sky and some of the mountains, is I really want this water to shine blue. And what we just did added a little bit, but just really here and here. I want all of the water. So I'm going to come to my highlights, and I want them to just be a bit more cyan, and this is affecting the entire photo, as you can see. Just bringing it there, maybe a little bit over to the blue. Don't think I need to touch the magenta or green, and I think that looks really nice. The color balance affects, and it already has its own kind of layer mask to it. So what I'm going to do is Command G, and now I can put a layer mask on the group, which will affect what's under it. So I put the layer mask on it. I'm going to invert it, because I don't want to touch our photo. I just want to really kind of put this on the highlights. So I'm going to paint white at maybe 75% opacity. I'm just going to, nope, that's too much. 40% opacity. Just gonna brush this in. Alright, so I'll show you before and after. That brings some really nice colors into it. And I'm going to check the backslash key. And here you can kind of see where you brushed in. It's a nice little tool to kind of see what you've brushed rather than trying to do it all by memory. And if you forgot any areas, you can just get that. Click X and not affect these rocks. Alright, let's check that out. So that's before, after. I think it looks awesome. The only thing I'm going to change is the opacity. I'm going to drop it to 75 because it is a bit strong. So before, after, bring some really, really nice tones into our photo. I'm going to do merge visible, Command Option Shift E. Call this water dodge luminosity mask. This is going to be our color balance mask. Merge visible 3. Turn all of these off. Then you can see our before, after. Done quite a bit, and it looks really, really awesome. One thing is I want to bring in some mood to this photo, so I'm going to kind of darken up this sky and darken up down here what not many people would be looking at, just to kind of keep the viewer on this really, really awesome waterfall. So I'm going to copy that, Command J, just call this camera roll. I'm going to grab a graduated filter, set these to 0. Okay, now I'm going to pull this down, just bring up the temperature, big time. A little bit of magenta, drop the exposure. I think that looks really nice and carried a little bit into the mountain and trees. So yeah, before, after. I think that looks really nice. Alright, I'm going to click OK. Yeah, that definitely brought in some nice mood and color, warmth to the top. Alright, before and after. That looks really, really nice. I'm going to make one more merge visible. Hide these. Before, after. It looks really, really nice. Make a dodge burn layer because when we kind of added the color to the water, it lost some of its brightness. So I want to make sure we can bring that back and the water really shines. So Option or Alt, click a new layer, soft light, neutral color. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to grab our color picker tool, pick something on the lighter side of the blues. There, let's see how that is. Don't need really much saturation, but I do need a good bit of brightness. So I'm going to actually pull all the way to the top. And now I'm just going to grab a brush, say 15%, maybe 10% opacity. And now I'm just going to brush in these rapids. Bring this up. 10's not showing up much. So this will really brighten up our rapids, and also will create this really cool haze effect on top of the water. For here, I'm going to bring 20% brush to really get some of this brightness. Need even less color, just really want to brighten this because it already has a good bit of blue and saturation in it. Kind of carry some of this out to add some haze. Need a light brush for this area just to get some of these little rapids. Come back to 20%. Kind of go over the rocks a little bit, give them some nice haze as well. Drop that back down. Alright, so let's zoom out. Look at that. Before, after. This just really adds some nice haze and brings back some of those highlights. I think maybe you could use a little bit more, so I'm going to do Command J to copy this layer. Hide both of these. This is before, after one layer, after two layers. And I think that really accentuates nicely. This top layer I might just drop to like 75. Look at those one more time. I really like that. I think right here one of my streaks is coming up too much, so on this second layer I'm going to layer mask it, take a black brush at 100%, just kind of brush that out because I don't want it to look like I painted it on. Yeah, that looks better. I like that a lot. Alright, so we'll call this Water Dodge 2. Make one more dodge burn layer. Soft light, 50% gray. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to burn the rocks in the water and the darker parts of the water to kind of make things pop more. So start down here and just want like a 10% brush. So the areas right next to this haze, I'm really gonna just burn to make them stand out. Against this water rapid right here, that will look really nice. little bit to kind of show the streaks in the water. And here I'm going to darken this up a good bit with a few passes, because that'll look really good contrasting with the water. Keep this side darker because it's getting less of the water haze. This is more getting splashed because it's facing it. And just feather that in. Alright, I think that looks much better. We'll do a before, after. That just really brings in some nice depth to that. All this water slash rocks burn. Make one more merge visible. Command Option Shift E. This merge visible 5. I'm gonna hide all these layers. I'm gonna do a before, after. I really like where this is coming. Yeah, a lot. We've done quite a bit to this photo. Added some really nice mood and haze and dreaminess, some really nice color and tones, a nice contrast of really warm yellow and greens in the trees and the mountains, and a nice really strong sunset sky with more clouds in the frame, to just this really dreamy water. I think it looks really good. I think all I'm going to do now is a little bit of dodging and burning in the trees. So I'm going to make dodge burn layer. And I'm going to click this layer as my source, and then I'm actually going to do a luminosity mask. And I'm going to channel just the lights. I'm going to come look at the source, grab my lights, keep going. I just want the lights of the trees, so that did a good job of just selecting those. I'm going to modify this. Let me zoom out though. Modify this with dark in the darks. Bring those up. Okay. I'm going to take a black brush. I don't want to be affecting the water in this. At 100% opacity, I'm just going to brush this out. Yeah, just want to be affecting up here. Grab a levels. Really want to get these as well in here. Alright. Channel. Call this trees and mountains. Alright. So now I'm going to open up this merge visible layer. I'm going to run this, make a selection. I'm going to do Command H to hide those selection lines. And now for this dodge burn layer, I'm going to take one of these light colors, some nice warm light on these trees, and they're pretty saturated, so I actually don't really want much saturation. Just like there. Yeah, that should be good. I'm going to take 25% opacity and just kind of brush in some of this color on some of these lights, and it almost makes it look like there's some fall colors in here just because of the way the sun is hitting these. I really like that. Zoom out and see what that looks like before and after. Drop that opacity, it's a bit strong. Yeah, I like that a good bit though. And this area is definitely lighter, the sun was hitting it, whereas this area was not as much. So I'm gonna give this side a few more passes than that side. That looks really nice. Yeah. Just trees dodge. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is kind of just do one more dodge burn layer and almost make like a vignette and kind of just darken the areas that I don't want the viewer to be looking at as much. But first thing we have to do is Command D to deselect our selection lines from our luminosity mask. So I'm going to make a new dodge burn layer now. Soft light, neutral color, and 8% opacity, just down here. There's really nothing going on for the viewer that they need to see, so just gonna darken this whole area up. Even a little bit over here, just in this corner of these rocks. And this corner is not as important. These trees I don't really touch because we just brighten those up and I want those to stay bright. But just this corner of the sky, I really want to hit. I think that looks nice. So let's do a before, after. It just kind of, rather than just have this whole image, the lighting the way it does, this kind of focuses the eye on this central area and kind of takes that corner out and that corner out, which there's not much going on in either of those, or the focus should be right around this area. So I think that helped a good bit. One thing I noticed is down here looks a little saturated, probably from what we just did by darkening that. I'm going to make a merge visible layer. All this real quick vignette, direction of light. Call this fix corner blue. So come to camera raw filter. Just gonna take the vibrance, bring it down to there. Look at that before and after. And then since I don't want to affect the whole image, I'm gonna layer mask that, invert it, and then I'm just gonna brush in white. Right, and I'm actually not going to do this at 100% opacity. I'm going to drop it to like 50, just so there's no harsh lines. I'm just going to paint a little bit of blue out of that corner. I think that looks good. Yeah, that definitely helps. Last merge visible layer. Merge visible 6. Take these out. Now we can look at our complete before, after. I'm extremely happy where this image has come to. We added mood, tone, a lot of really nice colors and luminance to some of the colors. We really made this water pop. Had a nice direction of light, keeping the focus in the center of the photo where we wanted it, and kind of in these mountains, trees, and this waterfall. And I think we did a really good job of utilizing all of the tools in the first handful of chapters, and you can really see with this kind of how you can apply all of these techniques and manipulate your photos to get the most out of it. This is not necessarily staying true to some parts of the photos, but it is a lot of pre-planning for exposure blending, and there's clearly warping in the photo, but if you aren't the biggest naturalist in the world and hold the highest morals or standards, and you just kind of want to create the coolest image you possibly can, you can really pull a lot out of your images. And yeah, I hope this helps. I hope you guys are able to see how I kind of use these techniques and apply them to your own. And if there's anything that you think I didn't answer to the best of my ability, please shoot me a message or just let me know. Be happy to explain anything further. Or if you're having a tough time applying any of these techniques to your photos, just shoot me a message and I'll do what I can to help. Thank you.